You ever notice how some design trends look amazing online, but fall apart the second you try them at home? Because not every trend that photographs well actually works in real life. And so in this video, I'll break down 5 of the most popular design trends that fail the hardest once you start living with them. From kitchens that just don't work to rooms that push things too far and just end up feeling empty. You'll see why these trends look great on Pinterest and Instagram, but terrible in person, and more importantly, how to fix each one so they actually work for you. And at the end, I'll show you the one design rule that ties all 5 together, which might be your savior if you're living with any of these 5 trends right now. So number 1 on the list here is all white kitchens. I mean, all white kitchens look great in magazines and Pinterest boards, but in real life, they're a pain to maintain. Every smudge, scratch, or sauce splatter is on full display, and without the perfect styling, they go from crisp and minimal to cold and empty really fast. For example, this kitchen here looks fresh, but the white on white design just highlights every mess. And this open shelf adds pressure to keep everything perfectly styled 24/7. The glossy finishes reflect fingerprints, light streaks, and every little flaw, and with no wood, color, or texture, the space ends up feeling more futuristic than it does livable. Now, I've got to be honest, the skylights here do help, but the white cabinets, white island, and the white pendant lights still blend together. And so it's clean, but it's almost too clean because there's no visual anchor. So the black fixtures and wood floors try to warm things up a bit, but the pale counters and backsplash just fall flat. And so without the little touch of flowers and gold accents we've got in here, the space would just feel completely unfinished. So how do you make white kitchens work? Well, you don't need to ditch white altogether. You just need to give it a bit of support. And a few well-placed materials can make all the difference here. For example, natural wood and marble bring some warmth and texture without overwhelming the clean look, right? A wood island, some open shelves, or marble countertops soften the sterile quality of an all-white kitchen, and they add some subtle variation that makes the room easier to live in. Having some black accents act as visual anchors, so the space doesn't feel like one giant blur. So even something as simple as black hardware, black fixtures, or some black light pendants give the eye a place to land and balances out all that brightness. And then any kind of layered surfaces add some depth and intention to the design. And so open shelves, styled counters, and mixed finishes keep the kitchen from looking flat or unfinished and make it feel polished and genuinely livable. But speaking of open shelving, you can definitely push that too far, because open shelves seem to be everywhere in kitchen design today, and they can look amazing on Instagram. But in real life, they're magnets for dust, grease, and just visual clutter. And so unless you're styling them constantly and keeping everything spotless, they start looking messy really fast. And for most people, they're high maintenance and low payoff, which is not a good combination. So take a look at these kitchens, right? Here in the first one, the shelves are crammed with ceramics, bowls, and other decor, which is beautiful, but you'd have to dust and arrange them constantly, right? And one wrong placement and everything just looks cluttered. Even if you style these shelves with intention, the sheer number of tiny items just makes the space feel busy. And when there's no closed storage, it means there's no room to hide anything. Now, this kitchen definitely feels charming, but it also feels a bit like a display zone, right? With jars, mugs, cutting boards, and plants. It all adds up visually and it starts to feel crowded really quickly. And so here, the blue tile backsplash does try to help, but the shelves still demand constant upkeep. And so if anything is out of place or you get a serious buildup of dust, then it's just gonna break the balance immediately. So how can you actually make open shelving work? Well, again, you don't need to ditch open shelves entirely, but you do need to treat them like decor, not like storage. So here are a few examples of what can actually work. First, you can use glass front cabinets that give you that same open look, but have practical protection from dust, grease, and your everyday mess. So you can still display your favorite dishes or glassware, but the glass panels keep everything cleaner for much longer. And this way you get that airy feeling of openness without the constant stress of maintaining a picture-perfect shelf. And then you want to keep your heavy-duty storage behind doors, which puts function ahead of form, right? So everyday items like pots, pans, and pantry goods are definitely better hidden away where they don't add visual noise. And the closed storage makes the kitchen calmer and more efficient, while having a few open displays gives a bit of style without sacrificing order. Now, the third trend that looks amazing online but often fails in real life is wallpaper that overwhelms the room. I mean, look, wallpaper can be gorgeous, but when it covers everything, it can feel more suffocating than it does stylish. I'm talking about bold patterns, loud colors, and full wall saturation just makes it hard for the eye to rest. And so the space ends up feeling busier than it needs to be, and worst of all, it's not easy to undo once the wallpaper is up. Now, in this first room, I actually think the wallpaper looks pretty good, right? But the pattern runs wall to wall and includes matching curtains, which makes the room feel too busy and repetitive because there's no visual break, so your eye doesn't know where to land. Personally, I would get rid of the matching curtains, put them in something more neutral, and allow the wall to speak for itself. Now, this more moody wallpaper wraps the entire room and the window frame, which creates this kind of cave-like effect. But without contrast or a better light balance, then it just feels heavier than it should. Now here, between the chevron walls, the bright rug, and the patterned furniture, there's just way too much going on, right? It's hard to appreciate the wallpaper when everything else is competing with it. And then this dotted blue wallpaper extends right down onto the headboard of the bed, and so nothing stands out and everything just blends into this sea of tiny dots. So how do you make wallpaper work? Well, the wallpaper itself isn't the problem, it's how you use it. And so you can still have pattern and texture without turning your room into a funhouse. First, you want to let the wallpaper support the room's design, not compete with the furniture, textiles, and artwork. So bold patterns work best when the furniture and decor around them are simpler, so that nothing feels like it's fighting for your attention. And in that case, the wallpaper becomes a backdrop that enhances the room, not the main event that overwhelms it. Then you also want to choose tone-on-tone patterns that add texture without shouting. So I'm talking about soft stripes, delicate botanicals, or some kind of geometric print in a muted shade. They all bring depth without becoming distracting. And so the design feels layered and sophisticated, but still lets you breathe when you're in the space. And you may also want to consider using wallpaper as an accent wall or backdrop, but not across every surface. So a single feature wall, or even just behind a section of the room, like behind the bed or a sofa, it can create impact without overwhelming the entire room. And this way, the pattern draws the eye where you want it, while leaving the rest of the space calm and balanced. Now, the number 4 trend that looks great online but doesn't necessarily work in real life is over minimalism. So minimalism is supposed to feel calming, but when you take it too far, it just kind of feels empty, right? When you strip away all the warmth, softness, and personality out of a space, what's left can feel cold, sterile, and even just unfinished. And so it doesn't actually feel peaceful like you think it will, it just feels under-designed. So here, this bathroom is technically minimal, but it's also just cold and stark, right? The lack of texture or detail makes it feel more like a showroom than a real space where someone actually wants to spend time. Now here, which I guess is supposed to be a living room, there's just nothing to connect with, right? There's just a floating TV, 2 chairs, and a big empty void. And so it feels more like a waiting room than it does a living room. And then in this space, the geometric shapes and see-through chairs look kind of cool, but the space just feels lifeless, right? There's no softness, no warmth, and no real personality to balance these clean lines. So the question is then, how do you add warmth without losing that minimalist look? Well, I'm not saying you need to clutter your space to make it feel inviting, but I am saying that the best minimalist interiors use soft textures, natural materials, and carefully chosen accents to keep things serene and human. For example, this living room is still minimal, but it's so much warmer thanks to the layered textures, the soft neutrals, and the natural wood. And so instead of a stark white box, that mix of materials gives the room depth and a ton of dimension. So wood grains, woven fabrics, and the subtle color shifts soften the clean lines, which proves that you can keep the minimalist look while making it feel human and livable. And then this living room also keeps a very clean palette, but having the leather sofa, the woven table, and even the leafy plant makes it feel down to earth, right? The sleek backdrop is still intact, but these natural and organic elements bring a ton of warmth and comfort. And so the space feels curated instead of feeling cold, and it just shows how minimalism doesn't have to sacrifice on coziness. And you can see how even this small corner feels inviting, right? With the curved sofa, the black accent table, and just a touch of greenery shows how a little softness can go a long way, right? The rounded form breaks up these rigid lines, and the greenery adds life and just a ton of freshness, right? And so together, they turn what could have been an empty looking nook into a welcoming and functional part of this home. Now, trend number 5 that looks great online but fails in real life is overdoing eclectic design without any sense of balance. I mean, eclectic interiors are meant to feel creative and layered, but when every element is fighting for your attention, it quickly just turns into chaos. Because the whole point of eclectic style is contrast, but when you don't pair it with restraint, it just becomes overwhelming instead of interesting. So this room hits you with everything at once, because it has it all. Floral armchairs with red fringe, teal ceramic stools, these vibrant bookshelves packed to the brim, an extremely layered mantle, and a sprawling multicolored rug. So it's joyful, yes, but there's no pause and no visual breathing room, and so it forces your eyes to work overtime as they try to figure out where to land. Now here, the mix of ornate wallpaper, heavy velvet seating, gilt-framed paintings, and this very richly patterned rug could work, but nothing feels particularly curated. Nearly every inch of wall space is covered in artwork, every piece of furniture has its own strong personality, and the layers of color and texture are all competing for your attention. So there's no anchor to tie everything together, and the room ends up feeling like a thrift store explosion rather than a well-curated space. And even with a semi-cohesive color palette and some beautifully built-in bookcases, this room still crosses the line. It's got these very loudly patterned walls, bold blue ikat chairs, glossy tables, a ton of pillows, and all these decorative ceramics, so everything is designed to stand out. But when everything tries to stand out, nothing actually does. So how can you embrace this sort of eclectic style without getting overwhelmed? Well, the trick is to choose your moments. So if your sofa or curtains are the star, then you want to keep the rug and walls quiet. If your art is loud, then you want to keep the furniture grounded. Because eclectic design only works when there's contrast in intensity, not just contrast in style. Now, this room still uses a bold floral sofa and colorful accents, but notice the clean white rug, the plain armchair, and the solid red curtain. The walls are neutral, the floor is soft, and everything else is grounded enough to let these patterns shine. Again, in this room, the palette is colorful, but everything is simplified. The camel leather sofa, the off-white walls, and the brown rug create this nice sense of calm. And then pops of color come through the pillows and the artwork, but nothing feels like it's fighting for your attention. And even with a maximalist gallery wall and some playful furniture, this space still works because the floor, walls, and ceiling are all consistent. The charcoal gray backdrop and the simple carpet ground the energy of the space, and they just give the eye room to rest even when the accessories are loud. So you just saw how some of the most popular design trends can look perfect online until you actually try living with them. And I've linked to a few more videos in the description that show you how to fix any design mistakes you're already living with the right way. But here's the thing, even when your home looks great, there's still something that quietly ruins how it feels. It's not the layout, the color, or the lighting, it's the everyday stuff you think you need. So check out this video up here where you'll learn which items are ruining the feel of your home without you even realizing it, and why getting rid of just one of them can make your space feel twice as calm and twice as beautiful overnight. I'll see you there.